When the cameras turned on, no one expected the storm that was about to unfold. Jasmine Crockett wasted no time. She leaned forward, her voice sharp, her words deliberate, cutting straight through the noise. "Kellyanne, you've built your entire career on twisting the truth, but tonight those twists end here." The crowd gasped, then erupted with shouts, some cheering, some stunned into silence. From the very first line, Crockett seized the stage, turning what was supposed to be a calm exchange into a fiery confrontation. Kellyanne Conway tried to compose herself, but Crockett was relentless, striking at the very foundation of Conway's credibility. The room pulsed with tension, every pair of eyes locked on the two women, as the opening clash set the tone for what would become one of the most explosive confrontations in the recent memory. This wasn't a random clash. It was the collision of two careers that had been circling the same story for years. Jasmine Crockett stood for accountability and for a kind of truth that demanded answers. Kellyanne Conway represented the machinery that had spun narratives for power for decades. Tonight's stage was not a courtroom, but it was a place where reputations were argued and reputations were broken. The topic pulled at every recent wound: the legacy of the Trump years, the leaked documents that refused to stay buried, the questions about influence and responsibility that had followed a certain family into every headline. Both women came prepared with names, dates, and sound bites, but only one came ready to turn those facts into a moment that could not be ignored. Crockett's voice carried facts as if she had written them on the walls of the room. She spoke of campaign memos, of press briefings that had doubled back on their claims, of timelines where promises dissolved the moment scrutiny arrived. She named specific moments and clipped them into sentences that landed like verdicts. "You said this when you served as spokesperson. You said the exact opposite a year later. Which version should the public believe?" The line was simple, surgical, and it forced Conway to choose which past to defend. Conway answered with the practiced cadence of someone who had fashioned messages for presidents and candidates. She offered broad principles and reframed incidents as context, invoking loyalty, strategy, the pressures of running communications in crisis. But Crockett met each reframing with a grounded counterpoint. When Conway raised nuance, Crockett responded with dates and direct quotes, letting the audience hear the contradictions without needing to be told how to interpret them. Journalists, pundits, and activists in the room listened as if they were inventory takers cataloging who answered and who deflected. Social media, already hot with fragments from earlier interviews and leaked transcripts, began to hum. Phones captured every line, every clipped rebuttal, and within minutes, editors were drafting headlines that asked the same question Crockett had shouted aloud: "Whose truth will stand up when the lights go down?" Outside, the public was primed. Weeks earlier, a viral leak had opened a door into networks of influence. Tweets and thread storms had created an audience hungry for accountability. Crockett rode that wave not as opportunism, but as claim staking. She insisted that private maneuvers had public consequences. Conway argued the opposite, that it was unfair to judge a lifetime of messaging by a single excerpt, and that history required context. As the exchange tightened, alliances began to reveal themselves. Those who had long distrusted Conway's class of spin doctors found in Crockett a champion who translated suspicion into prosecutable statements. Those who trusted Conway's judgment bristled at the tone they heard and called it a spectacle. Neither side could deny that what was unfolding was less about personalities and more about a test. Could truth, stated plainly and backed with evidence, topple a career built on shaping perception? The participants in that moment were not just the two women on stage. They included the staffers who had prepared the dossiers, the producers who chose which clip to replay, the moderators who hesitated for a beat too long, and the millions watching at home who would repeat the lines that struck them. Everyone present became a witness to whether a sustained factual assault could finally dislodge the narratives that had long protected power. The heat rose with every exchange. Jasmine Crockett was no longer just asking questions. She was stacking evidence, building a case in real time. Her tone sharpened, her cadence quickened, and her words hit like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. "Kellyanne, you told the American people one thing on Monday, then by Friday you reversed yourself without explanation. You built a career on contradictions, and you expect us to swallow them whole." The crowd erupted, half cheering, half booing, the sound bouncing off the walls. Conway straightened in her chair, trying to reset the balance. She leaned into her trademark confidence, answering with a smile that had carried her through years of scrutiny. Jasmine, politics is about adapting. It's about responding to new realities. You call it contradiction. I call it leadership. She let the words hang in the air, expecting applause, but instead a wave of murmurs swept the audience. Skepticism, not support. Crockett seized the opening. She pulled out Conway's own past statements, quoting lines that clashed so directly with what Conway had just said that the air in the room seemed to crack. You once said truth isn't about facts, it's about feelings. Do you still stand by that, Kellyanne? Or have you finally realized that facts don't disappear just because you rebrand them? Gasps cut through the hall, followed by thunderous applause. Phones shot into the air, recording what was already becoming a viral moment. Conway tried to pivot, dragging the conversation toward policy and away from personal credibility. But Crockett cut her off again, this time louder. You can't hide behind talking points. The American people deserve answers, not spin. The moderator tried to interject, but the crowd was too loud, roaring as if they were in the middle of a rally, not a debate stage. The tension was unbearable. Every time Conway attempted a defense, Crockett came back harder, armed with specific quotes, dates, and receipts that painted a portrait of deception. Conway's polished lines crumbled under the weight of exact language thrown back at her, word for word. By now, the confrontation had become more than a clash of opinions. It was the embodiment of two political styles colliding head-on, one built on reshaping narratives, the other on exposing them. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens, watching a battle of endurance and credibility unfold in real time. And then the moment that tipped the scale, Crockett, staring directly at Conway, declared, "The truth doesn't need a spin doctor, Kellyanne. It needs a voice. And tonight, that voice is mine." The hall exploded. The energy was no longer split. The crowd leaned decisively toward Crockett, cheering so loudly the moderator's gavel went unheard. The conflict had grown into a storm, and Kellyanne Conway was caught in the eye of it, struggling to regain control as Crockett pressed harder with every sentence. The atmosphere cracked open as Jasmine Crockett delivered her sharpest line yet. She leaned forward, voice rising above the chaos, and fired words that cut straight through the air. Kellyanne, you didn't just mislead the public, you lied to protect power, and you think no one will ever hold you accountable. But tonight, you answer for it. The audience erupted into thunderous applause, a roar that drowned out Conway's attempt to respond. She opened her mouth, but the sound of cheering, clapping, and even chants made her words vanish into the noise. Cameras zoomed in, capturing her eyes darting, her mouth working, but her voice lost in the storm. Conway tried again, louder this time. "That's not true, Jasmine, and you know it." But the crowd was already on its feet, some chanting Crockett's name, others shouting, "Tell the truth!" The moment shifted. No longer a debate, it had become a public reckoning. Crockett pressed on, her timing brutal and precise. She produced a printed page, a past transcript of Conway's own words, and read them aloud so the audience could hear. "Here, in your own words, you said facts were optional. Optional. How do you expect Americans to trust anything you've ever said since?" The crowd gasped, then exploded again, the sound deafening. For the first time, Conway faltered. Her smile slipped. She tried to launch into a counterattack, but Crockett didn't give her the space. "You've hidden behind clever phrases and slippery language for years," she declared, "but you can't hide from your own record. Tonight, the record speaks louder than you." It was the knockout line. The room shook with energy, the crowd on its feet, cheering with a force that made the stage itself seem unstable. Even those who had arrived skeptical of Crockett's firepower were swept into the moment, clapping, shouting, and chanting as Conway sat in stunned silence, her practiced armor cracking. Commentators watching live scrambled to react, their voices overlapping in disbelief. On social media, clips of Crockett's "The record speaks louder than you" spread like wildfire, hashtags exploding across platforms within minutes. The climax had landed, and it was clear to everyone that Kellyanne Conway had just been cornered in a way she had never been before. As the roar of the crowd refused to fade, Jasmine Crockett stood her ground. She didn't bask in the noise. She let it wash over the room until silence returned, and then she delivered the words that sealed the night. Her voice was steady, every syllable deliberate. The truth is not fragile. It does not need spin. It does not need excuses, and it does not bow to power. The truth always survives, even when people like you try to bury it. And that is why tonight, Kellyanne, this is not just my voice. It is the voice of millions who are done being deceived. The audience erupted again, this time not in shock, but in unity. The cheers rolled like a wave, spreading from the front rows to the back, each person clapping, shouting, and chanting as if history had just been written in front of their eyes. Kellyanne Conway sat frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the table. For the first time in her long career of verbal gymnastics, no phrase came to rescue her. No clever spin could erase the moment that had just unfolded. Her silence was louder than any rebuttal she might have offered. Crockett turned toward the audience, not with triumph, but with a kind of solemn determination. "This is not about me versus her," she said, her tone calmer now. "This is about whether we accept lies as leadership or demand honesty as the standard. Tonight, you made your choice clear." The crowd rose to its feet, chanting her name, their voices echoing beyond the hall and into the feeds of millions watching live. News anchors broke in mid-sentence to replay her lines. Commentators, stunned, declared it a defining moment of political theater. Hashtags surged, headlines flashed, and clips replayed across every platform within minutes. For supporters, it was vindication, proof that someone had finally stripped away the armor of one of politics' most polished defenders. For critics, it was a warning that the old methods of controlling narratives could no longer withstand the force of unrelenting truth. And for Jasmine Crockett, it was more than a victory. It was a message, etched into the memory of everyone who witnessed it. Propaganda may dominate for a season, but truth endures forever. The cameras lingered on the stage as the cheers roared on. A single line from Crockett now echoed across the nation. "The truth doesn't need a spin doctor, it needs a voice. And tonight, that voice was mine." The crowd thundered in approval, sealing the confrontation as one of the most unforgettable political showdowns of the era.